Showed up for Christmas, but my mom said, "Sorry, I think you have the wrong house." I was 32 and already regretting the drive before I even crossed the Indiana state line. I'd been on the road for nearly 12 hours, white-knuckling the steering wheel through what felt like the wrath of winter itself. Blizzards so thick they swallowed headlights. Wind that shoved my little sedan like it had a vendetta. I had blisters from gripping the wheel too tight, tension coiled in my shoulders like rope about to snap, and my windshield wipers were fighting a losing battle with slush and ice. But the thought of seeing my family again, of making things right, pushed me through every flake and flurry. I had packed the back seat with gifts I'd spent weeks picking out, a homemade cranberry orange pie, my mom's favorite, or at least it used to be, and a foolishly hopeful heart that believed showing up might melt years of silence. I had imagined it, rehearsed it even, my mom opening the door, eyes lighting up, maybe a tentative smile cracking her carefully set face. We'd cry, we'd hug, we'd talk like we used to. Maybe we'd be a family again. I pulled up to the house just after dark, the snowfall gentler now, but thick enough to quiet the whole street. The lights were on. A Christmas tree glowed in the window, all warm and golden and framed with garland. It looked like a damn postcard. I parked at the curb because the driveway had two unfamiliar cars in it. My boots crunched over fresh powder as I carried the pie, arms full of presents wrapped in tissue and hope. The porch light buzzed overhead as I rang the doorbell, heart pounding like it was trying to beat its way out of my ribs. The door opened fast, like someone had been standing right behind it, and there she was. My mother. Same pressed hair, same careful makeup, same way of looking right through you when she didn't want to see. For a second, just a split second, her eyes flicked to the pie in my hands. I opened my mouth to say something. I don't even know what anymore, but she cut me off with a tilt of her head and a cold, unfamiliar voice. "I'm sorry," she said, her expression unreadable. "I think you have the wrong address." I blinked. My brain stalled. I thought maybe I'd misheard her, or maybe she was joking, except there wasn't even the trace of a smirk on her lips. My throat closed. I said her name, softly, like I might wake her from a trance. "Mom, it's me. It's Allison." She looked past me, like she was scanning for someone else, then pulled the door closer to her chest like she was afraid of the cold, or maybe just afraid of me. "You should go," she said, and then, softer, "Please." The door clicked shut before I could speak again. The pie dropped from my hands. The glass dish shattered on the steps. I didn't move. I couldn't. My lungs were stuck somewhere between a breath and a sob. The snow kept falling, but I didn't feel it. I was still standing there when the porch light clicked off, leaving me alone with the sharp stink of citrus and cinnamon bleeding into the night. It didn't start in the snow, not really. It started years earlier in the kitchen of a house that always smelled faintly like antiseptic and overcooked rice, where the clock above the stove ticked too loudly and the linoleum floor never quite stopped creaking. I was 14 when the divorce finalized, barely out of middle school and already shoved into adulthood like it was a jacket I'd never grow into. My mother didn't cry when my father left. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She just stood at the sink, hands buried in soapy water, and said flatly, "It's better this way." Then she rinsed a plate and went on like she hadn't just watched her life cave in. That night, she handed me responsibility without ceremony or sentiment. "You're the oldest," she said, like that explained everything. "He needs you." And just like that, I was no longer a kid. My little brother Tyler was only 9 then, wide-eyed and soft-spoken, with a mop of hair that always fell into his face and a strange ability to be loved instantly by everyone, including the teachers who gave him second chances and the neighbors who slipped him extra cookies. My mother adored him in that quiet, exhausted way that mothers sometimes love their sons, too tired to say it, but too wired to hide it. She worked double shifts at the hospital, came home in scrubs that smelled like bleach and fatigue, and collapsed into the couch most nights with her shoes still on. I don't blame her. Not entirely. So I filled in the blanks. I packed Tyler's lunches, made sure his homework was done, learned how to braid his hair when he decided to grow it long like the skater boys at his school. I got a part-time job at the grocery store down the street, stacking produce and ringing up regulars who always commented on how responsible I was, how mature for my age, like that was supposed to make up for everything I was missing. I studied late into the night with textbooks propped open beside a sink full of dishes, memorizing biology terms while folding Tyler's laundry. Every time I wanted to fall apart, I remembered her voice, "You're the oldest," and kept going. Tyler got away with everything. Not because he was a bad kid, but because everyone, including me, wanted to shield him from how broken everything had become. If he forgot to clean his room, I did it. If he missed the bus, I drove him. If he mouthed off, it was brushed off. "He's just going through a phase," my mom would say, while I got lectures for leaving dishes in the sink or snapping back when I was too tired to pretend anymore. I learned quickly that being dependable meant you were invisible. If you didn't complain, people assumed you were fine. If you were strong, no one asked if you needed help. I used to think the balance would shift someday. That being the reliable one would eventually mean something. That all the unseen work, the emotional glue, the invisible scaffolding I held up day after day would be acknowledged, maybe even appreciated. But instead, it hardened into expectation. I was the backbone, the fallback, the one who could be counted on, until I wasn't needed, until I made the mistake of stepping away to live a life of my own. And even then, even now, I still catch myself wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe I was supposed to carry it all. Maybe being the older and smarter one meant being the expendable one too. When I first moved to Chicago, it felt like I was finally catching my breath for the first time in years. I got a decent marketing job, nothing glamorous, but it came with benefits and a paycheck big enough to rent a one-bedroom in a half-decent neighborhood without roommates. For the first time in my life, I had mornings without screaming alarms for someone else's school schedule, evenings without dishes piling up from a dinner I didn't even eat, and weekends that belonged entirely to me. But that freedom came laced with guilt so familiar it felt like part of my skin. It wasn't even a month into my new job before the first call came. My mom's voice on the other end, soft but strained. The dryer's finally gone out. I can't afford to replace it right now. I didn't hesitate. I Venmo'd her $300 the same day. It started like that. Little things. A broken appliance, a surprise medical bill, a rent shortfall. Tyler needed new tires, then a new laptop for school, and eventually, when the old sedan finally died on him altogether, I co-signed a lease and paid the down payment on a used Honda. I told myself it was temporary, just until they caught up, just until things got better. But things never got better. By the second year, I had a routine $800 wired to my mom at the start of every month, $500 to Tyler a week later. No one ever asked for that exact amount. It just gradually became the number that kept the crises at bay. If I skipped a month, there'd be a passive-aggressive text from my mom. I guess we'll just have to figure something out, followed by a guilt-soaked update about a bill that might go unpaid or a medical appointment she'd have to cancel. Tyler, on the other hand, would just go quiet, like silence was his form of protest. Then a week later, he'd pop back up like nothing happened, asking if I could cover a book order for class or send something for groceries. I didn't even question it at first. I was making enough to live and still give. And giving, in a strange way, felt like staying tethered to something. I told myself I was keeping the family afloat, but the truth was uglier. I was trying to buy my place in their lives. Every wire transfer felt like a bid for closeness. Every payment was a peace offering wrapped in financial obligation. I believed that maybe if I gave enough, helped enough, sacrificed enough, the thread between us wouldn't snap completely. I was alone in a city of millions, but every time I hit send on those transfers, I told myself I was still part of something, still a daughter, still a sister, still needed. I didn't realize until much later that I was the only one clinging to that thread. Everyone else had already let go. The signs were there, but like everything else I didn't want to see, I brushed them aside with the kind of practiced denial that only comes from years of learning to survive disappointment. At first, I noticed them in the background of photos. Tyler posing in front of a new flat-screen TV with a console I definitely hadn't been told about, or Mom smiling next to a stainless steel fridge I'd never seen before. There was a new rug in the living room, a different microwave on the counter, little upgrades I hadn't paid for, but knew had to come from somewhere. I never asked. I didn't want to be petty. I didn't want to be the one who kept score. But the calls stopped coming. What used to be weekly check-ins turned into missed texts, then silence. I'd call on a Saturday, let it ring until voicemail picked up, and get a reply the next day, maybe, always vague and distracted. Sorry, busy weekend. Just a lot going on. We'll catch up soon. And we never did. Sometimes I'd learn more about their lives through Facebook than from them directly. My mom posted about Tyler's grades, his part-time job, even a weekend trip they took to Wisconsin, all things I hadn't heard about until they were public for the whole internet to see. Meanwhile, when I got promoted, no one called. No, congratulations. No card, not even a text from my own mother. When I won an industry award, something I'd worked years for, I sent them a photo of me holding the plaque. My mom didn't reply. Tyler sent a thumbs-up emoji 6 hours later. That was it. Not once did they ask how work was going. Not once did anyone ask how I was doing, what I was feeling, what my life looked like beyond the numbers I wired them each month. I began to feel like a walking ATM. It didn't matter what I achieved, how exhausted I was, or how much I longed for connection. My role had calcified into something sterile and transactional. I wasn't Allison anymore. I was the money. The buffer that kept their lights on, their fridge full, their lives smooth and uninterrupted. They didn't want my presence. They wanted my absence to be productive. The silence that used to sting now felt like confirmation. I wasn't part of the family anymore. I was just funding it. I thought maybe Christmas could fix it. I clung to that idea like it was a life raft. Like if I just did everything right, wrapped every present just so, baked the damn cake exactly like Grandma used to with the sugar crusted on top and the citrus zest folded in by hand, maybe something would shift. Maybe they'd look at me and see more than the sum of my deposits. Maybe we could sit in the same room again without it feeling like I was intruding on something that used to belong to me. I planned every detail like it was a campaign launch. Each gift was carefully chosen, not just purchased. Tyler's favorite brand of headphones, a hoodie he'd mentioned in passing months ago. For Mom, a silk scarf like the one she used to wear in the 90s, when she still dressed up for Christmas morning. And because it never felt like enough, I added an extra envelope, $1,000, in crisp bills, marked for the holiday, tucked discreetly between the wrapping paper and my well-worn pride. I even paid for rush shipping on a few items to make sure nothing arrived late. Every free night I had after work was spent checking lists, comparing deals, handwriting cards, even though I knew they'd probably skim them. And the cake. God, the cake. I hadn't made it in years. It took 4 hours, not counting the overnight soak for the fruit, and I still had the burn marks to prove it. It was the one tradition we all used to love, the one thing that made us feel like a real family even after the divorce, when the walls felt thinner and everything echoed differently. I wanted that memory to live again, just for a night. But with each phone call and the days leading up to the drive, the excitement on the other end seemed to drain away like air from a slow leak. Mom answered on speakerphone while cooking, her replies curt and distracted. Tyler barely picked up at all, and when he did, he sounded like he was humoring me, like this was just another task he had to get through before logging back into whatever game or group chat he cared more about. Yeah, Christmas will be chill, he said, and that was the most enthusiasm I got. I told myself they were tired, stressed, maybe trying to keep things low-key. Maybe they were saving the real reaction for when I arrived. That's what I told myself as I loaded the car, as I wrapped the pie in 2 layers of foil and cleared the back seat for all the gifts, as I checked the weather warnings one last time and left Chicago before sunrise. When I pulled onto the street, our street, the one that hadn't changed in 15 years, where the potholes were always in the same places and the streetlights buzzed a little louder than they should, I saw them. 3 cars in the driveway. 2 in front of the house, and 1 parked half on the lawn like someone had arrived late and didn't care. The front windows were lit up with the soft glow of string lights, and through the living room curtains I could see movement, shadows, laughter, flashes of red and green wrapping paper being torn open. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't waiting for me. It was already happening. There was no empty driveway waiting for my arrival. No hush of anticipation. No open arms. They were inside, celebrating, full plates and louder voices, Christmas in full swing. And I was outside, holding a pie no one asked for. The knock was light, hesitant even, like part of me already knew how this was going to end. I could hear voices inside, laughter, music, the hum of conversation layered over the clatter of plates and glasses. I waited a beat longer, then knocked again, a little firmer this time. The door swung open so fast it startled me, and there she was, standing in the glow of the foyer, framed by garland and warm light that made everything feel too intimate, too fragile. She looked different, older maybe, or just distant in a way I couldn't name. Her eyes skimmed over me, then down to the pie in my hands, the gifts clutched awkwardly under my arm, and something behind her expression hardened. "I told you not to come," she said, her voice flat, almost embarrassed. Behind her, a man I didn't recognize was laughing too loudly. A woman in red heels crossed the hallway with a glass of wine, and it hit me all at once that this wasn't a family gathering, it was a party. A full house, and I wasn't invited. I started, but she cut me off with a sharp breath and a glance over her shoulder like I was a problem she didn't have time to solve. "We have important guests," she said, quieter now, but firm. "You shouldn't be here. Go." I stood there like an idiot, heart pounding, stomach knotting so fast it made my fingers tremble. "Mom, I drove 12 hours, I whispered, but she was already pulling the door tighter, her body angled like a barrier. Behind her, I saw Tyler. He was leaning against the doorframe to the living room, hoodie pulled up, hands in his pockets, not even pretending to be surprised. Our eyes met for half a second, and I waited, for a word, a gesture, anything. But he didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at me like I was a neighbor's kid who'd rung the wrong bell. I swallowed hard. "Tyler." I said his name like it might bring him back to me, but he didn't respond. Not even a blink. And that's when I felt it. Really felt it. Like a crack running down the center of my chest. Whatever I had been to them, sister, daughter, caretaker, provider, it wasn't enough. It had never been enough. I bent down slowly, set the pie gently on the snow-covered porch, then laid the gift bags next to it one by one. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the envelope with the money. I left it anyway. She closed the door before I could straighten up. I stood there in the cold for a long minute, the wind slicing through my coat, the snow soaking through the knees of my jeans where I'd crouched. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just walked back to my car like a ghost, each step heavier than the last, the headlights from someone else's car casting long shadows behind me. I drove to the motel in silence, not even bothering to check in properly. I handed over my card without speaking, took the key, and walked into a room that smelled faintly of bleach and loneliness. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my coat, and stared at the wall. The gifts were still out there, probably buried in snow by now. The cake would be ruined. The money forgotten. But the worst part, the part that gutted me, wasn't the rejection or the silence or the doors slamming in my face. It was knowing, deep down, that they hadn't forgotten about me. They just didn't care. The motel room was dim, lit by a single weak lamp that buzzed every few seconds like it was trying to fill the silence. I hadn't unpacked, hadn't taken off my coat, hadn't even taken a sip of the lukewarm coffee I'd bought from the gas station 2 blocks away. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, still frozen in the moment from earlier, still hearing the sound of that door clicking shut like the final nail in something I hadn't realized was already buried. My phone buzzed, screen lighting up with Tyler's name. For a second, I stared at it like I didn't recognize it, like the letters didn't form anything I understood. Then, with a hesitant breath I didn't know I was holding, I answered. "Hey," I said, voice rough from not using it, from holding in too much for too long. "Yeah, hey," Tyler mumbled. "Just wanted to say, sorry, or whatever. It wasn't personal. You know how Mom gets." And before I could reply, before I could ask him what he meant or why he didn't say anything earlier, or why he watched me standing in the snow like a stranger outside a house I spent my entire life holding together, the line went quiet. I thought he hung up. I almost set the phone down. But then I heard it, the shuffle of movement, a laugh, his laugh. "God, did you see her face?" he said, voice clearer now. He hadn't hung up. Another laugh, higher, familiar in the way only years of silence can make someone still recognizable. "My mother. I told you she'd show up like some pathetic Hallmark character. With that pie," she said, mock sentimental. "Always so desperate to be needed." Tyler chuckled. "Well, she is useful. Like an ATM with guilt issues." "Exactly," my mother said. "She always was too soft. Easy to manage. Naive." Then came the part that didn't sound angry or mean. Just honest, casual, like they were talking about a piece of broken furniture they hadn't gotten around to tossing. "I mean, she's not really family anymore," my mom said, with a sigh that almost sounded bored. "She's just inconvenient now." They laughed again, and the call disconnected. Or maybe I hung up. I honestly don't remember. I sat there in that motel room, phone still warm in my hand, staring at the threadbare carpet like it could explain something that made sense. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I wasn't even hurt in the way I expected to be. I just felt hollow. Like everything I had believed in, every memory, every sacrifice, every wire transfer, every phone call, every birthday card, every night spent wondering if they were okay. It all evaporated in the span of 30 seconds. I wasn't their daughter. I was a transaction, a convenience, a placeholder. And now, I wasn't even that. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't pace the room. I just sat there at the small desk in the corner of the motel, lit by a weak yellow bulb, hands steady in a way I hadn't felt in years. There was no more space left for bargaining or excuses or hope. Whatever string had been tying me to that house, to those people, had snapped. Not frayed, not worn down. Snapped. Clean, loud, final. I opened my laptop, logged into every account I had, banking, credit cards, payment apps, and shut the floodgates. Transfer to Mom. Canceled. Tyler's monthly auto deposit. Removed. Emergency card linked to their Uber accounts, Amazon, Netflix, even the utilities I'd been quietly paying for just until things settle. Gone. I called the bank and put a stop on every account they had access to. Set new passwords. Issued new cards. Opened a digital folder labeled Family Financial Aid and itemized every cent I'd sent them over the past 8 years, $83 for 59.72. It took 2 hours. I pulled statements, scoured Venmo history, dug through old emails for receipts. I didn't round up or exaggerate. I wanted it accurate. I wanted it clean. Then I drafted a letter. Not a text. Not an email. A printed, signed letter that I scanned and sent through certified mail and attached to the end of the document. It said, in plain language, with every ounce of emotion scrubbed from the tone, effective immediately, I will no longer provide any financial support. This includes cash transfers, purchases, credit access, or emergency assistance. Do not contact me for money under any circumstances. Any future requests, direct or indirect, will be ignored. This is final. I hit send at 3:47 a.m. The first response came 12 hours later. A text from Tyler. You serious? After everything. I didn't answer. 20 minutes later, my mother called. I let it ring. Then the messages started. First were the guilt-laced ones. We needed you. You've broken this family. How could you abandon us? When that didn't work, they escalated. Threats to expose how ungrateful I'd become, claims of emotional damage, warnings about what they'd tell the rest of the family. Tyler texted me a photo of the car I'd helped him get, captioned, "Guess I should sell this now, huh?" As if that would make me reverse everything. I archived every message, saved them, labeled them, and I said nothing. They called me cruel, selfish, said I was unwell, said I was mentally unstable, said I needed help, but none of them apologized. None of them asked how I felt. None of them acknowledged the years I gave. The silence wasn't to punish them. It wasn't revenge. It was protection. It was survival. It was the first act of self-preservation I'd taken in a decade. And I wasn't going back. It didn't happen all at once. Healing never does. It started with silence, real silence, not the kind that comes from being ignored, but the kind you choose for yourself when you stop giving people power they never deserved. I deleted their numbers, archived their messages, cleared out the drawers in my apartment that used to hold receipts and reminders of everything I thought I had to be. Then I found a therapist. Her name was Melissa, and she didn't flinch when I told her I'd been financially supporting my family since I was 17. She didn't ask why I didn't stop sooner. She just said, "That sounds incredibly heavy." And for some reason, that nearly broke me more than anything else. I started cooking again, not out of obligation, not because anyone needed feeding, but because I wanted to. I made pies that stayed in my kitchen, not in the back seat of a car. I brought casseroles to the older couple down the hall, Shirley and Ed, who taught me how to play gin rummy on Thursday nights. They introduced me to a whole crew of retirees in the building who rotated hosting card games and potlucks, and soon I found myself in living rooms full of laughter that didn't sting. No guilt, no side comments, no backhanded remarks, just people who liked each other, who asked how I was and actually listened. I found friends who didn't know anything about my past, who never once looked at me like a bank account or a backup plan. We met through work, through trivia nights, through a community garden that I joined mostly to fill my weekends, and ended up loving. They didn't need anything from me except my time, my presence, my jokes, my stories, my awkward attempts at group selfies. They became my chosen family without ceremony, one meal, one text, one shared silence at a time. I still have the spreadsheet labeled Family Financial Aid. I haven't opened it in months. Not because I'm pretending it didn't happen, but because I don't need it to justify anything anymore. The truth is I gave too much, for too long, to people who saw me as a utility rather than a person. But that's not who I am anymore. I'm not a wallet. I'm not a buffer. I'm not the glue that holds together a family that never once tried to hold me back. I am someone who sets the table for herself now. And finally, it feels like enough. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had just picked up groceries from the co-op down the street and was walking home through that little park near the train station, the one with the chipped benches and the food truck that always smells like burnt onions. I wasn't in a hurry. The sun was out. I had the day off, and for the first time in what felt like forever, my thoughts weren't racing toward someone else's crisis. I had eggs, fresh rosemary, and a plan to make dinner for a neighbor recovering from surgery. It was just another quiet day in the life I'd built for myself, simple, peaceful mine. And then I saw him. Tyler, standing by the bench across from the fountain, fidgeting with the strap of his backpack like a kid waiting for a ride that wasn't coming. He looked older, thinner maybe, like life had scraped away some of that easy charm he used to coast on. Our eyes met, and for a moment, everything slowed. I felt my stomach tighten, but not from panic, just recognition. Like seeing an old photo of someone you used to know before everything got complicated. He walked toward me, hesitant but determined. "Allison," he said, almost like a question. I nodded. "Tyler, I didn't know you still lived around here," he said, then paused. "Can we talk?" I looked at him, really looked. At the face that used to call me the best sister ever, when I'd sneak him cookies, at the boy I used to defend, feed, drive, fund. And I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the sharp edge of betrayal anymore. Just distance. Like someone I'd once stood close to, now blurred by time and silence. "I'm not angry," I said, my voice calm, even. You're just not in my life anymore. He blinked, like he didn't expect that. Like he'd prepared for a scene, for tears, for something he could twist into guilt again. But there was nothing left to twist. I turned and walked away, the grocery bag still warm against my hip, the breeze brushing soft against my face. No tears. No sting. Just quiet. Just closure. 16 months ago, I thought losing my family would break me. But I hadn't lost them. They were never really mine to begin with. A real family doesn't measure love in dollars. A real family shows up, not just when it's easy or profitable. A real family appreciates you, your presence, your laughter, your effort, not your bank account. And I finally had that now. People who saw me. People who stayed. People who cared, not because I could do something for them, but because I was enough as I was. So I'm curious, when is the moment you realized someone was only in your life for what you could give them? How did you walk away? Did it feel like losing everything or gaining yourself? I'd really like to hear.